Right, so this is going to be a really quick look at the main UK newspapers, so that if you get a question on one in Component 1 Section A, particularly Question 2B, where you're having to compare either the Sun or the Guardian front cover to a different UK publication, then this is going to give you some really useful information. I'm going to start off at the tabloid end, move through to broadsheets, and also have a look at some that are no longer published anymore, just in case you get a paper from them. So starting off with the Daily Star, this is a red top tabloid, and we can tell that it's part of the red top group because it has a distinctive red masthead. Now its demographic tend to be men, and we tend to find that with tabloids, men are most of the primary demographics. However, this particular publication has quite a young primary demographic, so anybody between 15 to 25 is likely to fall into that primary demographic. And they're also going to be lower on the ABC1 system, C2 to E. That means the secondary demographic is made up of women and also older men, perhaps 26 to 35, and slightly higher on the ABC1 system, but not too far. It's very rare that we have anybody who is high on that ABC1 system buying a tabloid, but it's not completely out of the question, as you'll see later on. So the ideology or the beliefs of the paper, it doesn't support any political party in particular, but the Scottish version of the Daily Star is very right-wing and campaigns for an independent Scotland. Now, because it's not attached to any political party, there's less focus on political news, more focused on gossip and celebrities as a whole. And it's also owned by a company called Northern Shell. Now, they own the Daily Express, Channel 5 and other magazines such as OK. So they've got quite a large media base to get their beliefs and their values out across. Okay, so the Sun, this is really important for you guys to know, because obviously the Sun is going to be not only one of the front covers that you have to study, but also a company that you have to study for Component 1 Section B. Now this is a red top tabloid, and again we've got a very similar demographic to the Daily Star, but here we can see that that primary demographic are older, the secondary demographic therefore being younger. Now their ideology of the Sun flicks between Conservative and Labour, and it's very fickle because it tends to support whoever's in power at the time. But having had a look over the previous elections and having a look at the Sun, they have supported Conservatives more regularly than they have Labour. Because they don't really support a political paper and they're very fickle, they keep their political news to a minimum unless it's an election year. Obviously with big stories such as Brexit, you're going to see those appearing on front pages of all of the papers, regardless of whether they're normally political or not. Any politics that tend to be included are also sensationalised, so they're made more dramatic, more entertaining, because the main focus is going to be on gossip and celebrities. Now, the Sun is owned by News UK, and the person in charge of that, the CEO, is Rupert Murdoch. He also owns or has part in companies such as Fox and Sky, so he's a really important person to be aware of within the media industry. The Daily Mirror is a red top tabloid, again very similar demographic to the Sun, so primary demographic, secondary demographic, virtually identical. However, it is a strong Labour supporter, so this makes the Daily Mirror the main competition for the Sun newspaper. Now, it has less political news, but does view Labour ideals and beliefs more favourably. Any politics, again, that is included or are also sensationalised. There's a bigger focus on gossip and celebrities, and this is owned by a company called Reach plc. Okay, so the Metro then. This is not a red top, but it is still a tabloid because it focuses more on sensationalised stories, gossip, also celebrity news as well. But it's a free sheet because it has a free price point. That means that it's available for anybody to pick up, usually at train stations or at bus stations. So one of the main things that sets it apart from other publications is that it's not aligned with any political party. It tries to remain free and popular with both consumers and advertisers, so it doesn't really want to annoy anybody or put anybody off. The content means that it includes a mixture of politics and sensationalised news, but it has to appeal to a large audience because people who are commuting are going to be from different walks of life, have different beliefs, so it needs to stay as popular as possible. Now, it's owned by quite a large company, DMG Media. They not only own the Metro, but they also own the Daily Mail and Wowcher as well. So they have an opportunity to use the advertisers that work with Wowcher to put in their paper, and that helps to keep them free. Now we're moving into the middle market section. The I is a middle market. We could be fair in classing it as a broadsheet because one of the things that it's well known for is that it was a sister publication to the Independent paper, which was a broadsheet. It has a fairly old primary demographic who are 35 to 50, A to C1 on the ABC1 system, which means that the secondary demographic are going to be younger. But it doesn't tend to discriminate in terms of gender. Both men and women access this almost equally. The ideology is fairly central, so it doesn't really support a political party. It tends to support issues and to raise its voice on certain issues. Those that tend to be hot at the time of writing. So if something's particularly important within the news at the time, then it will report on it. Now, this is owned by a company called Johnston Press, who are not very well known because they tend to focus on publishing local editions to papers. But as we've said, it was a sister publication to the Independent, which is no longer in print. Okay, the Daily Express. So this is a firm middle market paper. The demographic, again, tend to be older, but here they tend to also be men as well. And that's because this is a very right-wing paper, so it tends to be more aggressive in terms of its tone and its language. It was a very avid UKIP supporter, and at one point I believe there was financial transactions between the Daily Express and the UK Independence Party, so we tend to see that the content is very British centred and British focused. They held traditional values and issues that they feel are putting those values under threat, such as immigration, tend to feature more within the paper itself. Now these, as we've seen, are owned by Northern Shell, so we know that they're part of a large company who have multiple publications. The Daily Mail then is one of our final middle market papers. They have a fairly old demographic. They have quite a high demographic on the ABC1 system. They are very conservative. They're concerned with the welfare of Britain, but mostly those traditional values and those traditional beliefs. Now, it has been critical of the BBC in the past, and because its articles are centred around traditional values such as the monarchy, it's not afraid to speak out on issues that it believes are putting those traditional values at risk. Now, that puts it in contrast to other media publications who perhaps wouldn't be so outspoken because they need to keep their political party on side. And obviously we've seen that it's owned by DMG Media, so again, more opportunity to share advertising through those different companies. Okay, heading into our broadsheets then. Now, although The Guardian took a step towards being potentially tabloid middle market with its format, we can still class it as a broadsheet because the tone and the style of it remains firmly broadsheet. Now, it's got a very sort of mixed demographic, men and women, but the primary demographic tend to be older and higher on the ABC1 system. It's centre-left wing, so that means that its readers tend to vote sort of Labour or Liberal Democrats. It avoids commenting directly on politics, but it's fairly faithful to the traditions that it held as a paper for the lower middle classes, despite the fact that it's got quite a high ABC1 system audience. Now, this is owned by a company called Scots Trust. They also own the Observer, and the paper itself used to be known as the Manchester Guardian, but then obviously became more popular, and that's where we've got this name from now. The Daily Telegraph is a broadsheet, again very similar demographic to the other broadsheets that we've seen at the time. However, this particular paper has a centre-right wing readership, and so this is going to be the main competition for the Guardian. It tends to be more conservative in its views. It was the most popular broadsheet newspaper, so it tends to be the one that people pick up, and it also is known for publishing big news stories first, so they tend to get the scoop on those big stories, such as the MP Expensive scandal. Now, this is owned by the Telegraph Media Group. They also own the political paper The Spectator, so they have more room within the Spectator to be critical of politics, which means the Daily Telegraph tends to be free to publish a more mixed content. The Times is also a broadsheet, again very similar demographic to the broadsheets that we've seen before. This is also centre left wing. Now they tend to have no alliance or no public alliance to any party, but their readers are conservative or Liberal Democrats. They're very traditional, and this paper has been running all the way back to the Empire, so it's the oldest running newspaper that we're going to look at. It's the most popular broadsheet newspaper and tends to publish big news stories first. So here we have competition between the Times and the Daily Telegraph, who are very evenly matched in terms of their popularity and also what they're known for. Now this is owned by News UK, Rupert Murdoch, who also owns Fox and Sky. Now because Rupert Murdoch owns another news outlet in Sky, might be one of the reasons why this is able to give the Telegraph such a run for its money in terms of getting the big stories like that MP expenses scandal first. Okay, Financial Times then. Now this is a broadsheet. Their primary demographic is obviously similar to the other broadsheets that we've seen so far, but specifically this caters to businessmen and women. This has a political and financial focus within its content, which we can tell stated by the title. It advocates free markets. It's very much in favour of globalisation. It used to support conservative policies, but tends to focus now on whoever is pushing money and capitalism. Now this is owned by Nikkei, which is a Japanese newspaper, and it's the world's largest financial newspaper. Okay, The Independent then. So this was a broadsheet. It's no longer in print, but it does still exist online. And you may face, or you may find that in component 1, question 2b on section A, that you could get a front cover of The Independent, because although it's online, it still does publish sort of front pages. So again, the demographic are very similar to what we've seen in broadsheets already. It holds a centre-left wing. Many readers have a very liberal view, so they tend to support the Liberal Democrats. It moved away from broadcast journalism to take more of a tabloid-style view of the news, but its language and its tone still places it firmly within that broadsheet genre. It was formerly owned by the Independent News and Media Group, and that was sold to Alexander Lebedev, who was a Russian oligarch, in 2010. Now, since then, it has been online only, but as I said, you guys could still get a copy of this to compare to either The Guardian or The Sun. And finally, then we're going to have a look at The New Day. Now, The New Day was a middle market tabloid paper that didn't really run for very long. It focused mainly on women who were 24 to 40. They would be roughly B to C2 on the ABC1 system. So that secondary demographic is made up of younger women, slightly older women, and also men as well. Maybe 50 plus, who were either A or D. Now the paper wanted to make the news more accessible to a female audience. They wanted to cover news in a non-biased, objective way. The content was family orientated to suit the target demographic, and the whole aim of the paper was that it could be read and digested in 30 minutes. But it only lasted 3 months before closing down. Now, it was owned by Reach plc, who also own the Mirror. And if you guys want me to have a larger look at The New Day, then just pop a comment down below and I'll give you a rundown on the short-lived paper. Okay, so one thing that I'm going to be doing new in these videos is displaying key terms for you. So I've gone through the video. These are all of the key terms that you need to be aware of. What would be a really great idea for you guys now is to make these into note cards or put them in a form that you understand. If you have any questions, you can send me a message through Twitter at media_revision. You can put a comment in the comment section down below. Please subscribe, hit the button down below, and if you click the little bell icon next to it, then you get instant notifications every time I upload a new video.